JD Vance has been making the rounds, and I forgot all about him until he started opening up his big fat mouth and saying a bunch of things that are, disrespectful, dehumanizing, and contrary to the actual family that he has. But, Usha, whatever his wife's name, she chose him. I have no idea why. He has biracial children that apparently he doesn't really care about them or their futures. So we're going to tackle JD Vance's hypocrisy and so much more. I am so glad that you all are here. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to the Danielle Moodie Show, Damnation. Happy Thursday. I am so glad that you all are here. So we start off today, there was just too much news to conquer yesterday, so this was supposed to be in yesterday's roundup, but it's in today's because JD Vance has been all over the place. He went on a right-wing podcast because, of course, this is where these people feel comfortable. And I want you to take a listen to what he says about the American people, what he says about immigrants. And then I want to remind you that he is married to an Indian woman and has 2 mixed race children. And of course, this won't play because why? Why work? Here we go.
Is actually evicted from the house because there are people who are going to pay more for rent. And then what happens is 20 people move into a 3-bedroom house, 20 people from a totally different culture, totally different ways of interacting. Again, we can respect their dignity while also being angry at the Biden administration for letting that situation happen and recognizing that their next door neighbors are going to say, well, wait a second. What is going on here? I don't know these people. They don't speak the same language that I do. And because there are 20 in the house next door, it's a little bit rowdier than it was when there was just a family of 4, a family of 5. It is totally reasonable and acceptable for American citizens to look at their next door neighbors and say, I want to live next to people who I have something in common with. I don't want to live next to 4 families of strangers. And the fact that
we all heard that, right? And we all have seen JD Vance's wife, right? We've all seen his in-laws, correct? They are not born of this country, right? His children are brown. And the audacity of him to sit there and say that it's totally okay for Americans to be racist because apparently everyone that lives on your block should look like you, worship like you, love like you. And if they don't, maybe firebomb them to get them out. It is just so disgusting. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe JD Vance should be one of the spokespeople for the all-white towns that are popping up all over the place. And I'm saying to myself, you want to live in an all-white town? You want to live in an all-white supposedly Christian town? By all means, leave the rest of us the hell alone. Don't shop at our stores. Don't DoorDash from our restaurants. Don't come into our places of business. Because you see, here's the thing. There was a time in this country when we had separate and unequal. And then Black people, through their own grit, determination, persistence, and bravery, built prominent, wealthy Black communities. Do you know what the whites who wanted segregation did? They burned those communities to the ground. They lynched those people because it was never about being separate and equal. It was about being separate and oppressed. It's always been about the ability to oppress and harm and cause violence against those people that you don't like. And where does that originate from? From language, from casual conversation that seems like no big deal when you are the sitting vice president of the United States and telling white people that it's absolutely okay not to like your neighbors because they don't speak the same language as you. So what if there are multiple generations living in one household? Aren't they lucky? Because they're not shipping their elderly family members off to nursing homes that have become, out of reach economically for most people. We used to love this idea of it takes a village to raise a child. And then all of a sudden fell for this trap around the nuclear family, which is also baked into capitalism. And mine, instead of our, the collective village. I don't want anyone to sit here and listen to JD Vance and think to themselves, well, that's kind of reasonable. Strangers always live next door, and they remain strangers until you knock on the door and introduce yourself. And that's how community gets built, not by this bullshit. And I just want to know. I really do. I want to know what happens after JD Vance has these podcast interviews, because that's clearly all he does as vice president of the United States. I want to know what happens when he goes home, right? Does his wife say anything? Do his in-laws call them up? Or do they think that we all don't recognize that they're brown? That they think that their proximity to whiteness is somehow going to save them. And I've said this before, and Waj said it as well, that, you know what, if something does happen to Donald Trump, if he doesn't make it all 4 years in his, deteriorating health, I guarantee you JD Vance gets a divorce. I guarantee it. I'm just, putting it out there. Absolutely disgusting. But what else do you expect? And so here's the thing I really enjoyed today. So this is from the Tennessee Holler. A brave woman asked JD Vance, when you talk about too many immigrants here, when did you guys decide that number? Why did you sell us a dream? You gave us a path and tell us we don't belong here? Why do you have to be Christian to be American? And I want you to take a listen to this woman, because I got to tell you, it's always women these days. But I mean, it's always women in general, the ones that hold these men's feet to the fire and don't allow them to get away with bull.
Hello, Mr. Vice President. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to talk here today. I did not agree with many of the things that you said right ahead of this, but I don't think that's my point to discuss here. What I want to ask is, you are married to a woman who is not Christian. In her Wikipedia, I just looked that up. I wanted to know what her faith was. I didn't know this before. But she still calls herself Hindu. You are raising three kids in cultural, racial, religious household. How are you maintaining, or how are you teaching your kids not to keep your religion ahead of their mother's religion? Or how are you teaching them that your kind, that kind who got here just few years or few decades ago is different or is better than your mom's kind who got here just a generation before? How are you balancing that? And when you talk about too many immigrants here, when did you guys decide that number? Why did you sell us a dream? You made us spend our youth, our wealth in this country and gave us a dream. You don't owe us anything. We have worked hard for it. Then how can you, as a vice president, stand there and say that we have too many of them now and we are going to take them out to people who are here rightfully so by paying the money that you guys asked us? You gave us the path, and now how can you stop it and tell us we don't belong here anymore? And one more thing, one more thing. Sure. Do you have to
There's a lot there. I don't know if I'm going to remember all this, but I will try.
I'm sorry. I had to say all of this. And please take it with due. I mean, I'm saying all of
course.
it with
No,
due
go ahead.
respect. I
Please.
have no
Thank you.
intention of causing a scene here or anything, but
We're not close to causing a scene.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
but we talked about Christianity, all of this. I'm not even Christian, and I'm here standing to so support. Why are we making Christianity one of the major thing that you have to have in common to be one of you guys, to show that I love America just as much as you do? Why is that still a question? Why do I have to be a Christian? Or
Okay. So there was a lot there, and I'm going to try to respond to as much of it as I can. So on the question of immigration, so first of all, I can believe that we should have lower immigration levels, but if the United States passed a law and made a promise to somebody, the United States, of course, has to honor that promise. Nobody's talking about that. I'm talking about people who came in violation of the laws of the United States of America, and I'm talking about in the future reducing the number of people. Sorry, what?
May I continue on that? Because when you just said you are not stopping with the people who came here legally, right? But you are pushing out policies that hurt us. And these policies are not even solving the problems. These policies are just creating chaos.
Ma'am. Okay, so again, I'm gonna finish answering the question, and then if I've answered all 9 of your questions in less than 15 minutes, then we can keep on going. We got to have a little fun, right? So here's the thing. I can believe that the United States should lower its levels of immigration in the future, while also respecting that there are people who have come here through lawful immigration pathways that have contributed to the country. But just because one person or 10 people or 100 people came in legally and contributed to the United States of America, does that mean that we're thereby committed to let in 1 million or 10 million or 100 million people a year in the future? No, that's not right. We cannot have, I'll go and finish. We cannot have an immigration policy where what was good for the country 50 or 60 years ago binds the country inevitably for the future. There's too many people who want to come to the United States of America, and my job as vice president is not to look out for the interests of the whole world. It's to look out for the people of the United States.
So, first off, that woman who stood up there and asked those thoughtful questions in front of the vice president in a, stadium full, not a stadium, but a room full of people. And then for him to gaslight her and gaslight everyone in the room and everyone watching, when his response to her question with regard to why would you promise us a dream? Tell us to come here. We come here legally. We work hard. We contribute. We love this country as much as you do. And now you're trying to push us out. And he's saying, oh, no, that's not happening. Do you know what else is really interesting is that when he's in those rally spaces, that is a mixed group of people. Oh, he refers to them as people, immigrants as people. But a couple of days ago, I saw him on Fox News calling them illegal aliens. JD Vance is a gaslighter, and he's an abuser, just like Donald Trump. Right? He puts on this soft smile and tries to make light of the fact that people are being kidnapped off of the street. Right? I'm watching ICE agents break into cars with children in them, glass shattering all over the place, mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts being thrown to the ground as if they are some type of terrorists. People that are being arrested inside of courthouses, going through the proper legal channels that this administration tells you that you're supposed to do, but you're going to arrest and terrorize people in courthouses. And I wish that JD Vance would just have the merit, right? Have the integrity to stand behind your bullshit and say to that woman's face and to everyone watching, yeah, we don't care if you've come here legally. We don't want any more Black or brown people in the country. The country is becoming a little too mixed for our liking, and we want to go back to when it was, more white. And we want to make sure of that moving into the future. And so we want to wrap up this whole mixing and diversity thing. Just tell the truth and say that, yeah, oh, I married Usha, back in a time when I had different politics. And, it was probably around the time when he called Donald Trump Hitler. But then he was given a bit of pocket change by Peter Thiel, which changed his mind, but he didn't want to change his wife. So he just had her sit quietly and shut the fuck up. Just tell the truth, right? Actually be a man. And this is why MAGA doesn't respect him. This is why the current regime is escalating their antics and powering through Project 2025, because JD Vance cannot possibly step into, right, the tiny shoes of a Donald Trump, because he doesn't have the pull. He doesn't have the cachet. He doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't have the people that are willing to follow him, because he moves with the wind. Donald Trump is an asshole. Donald Trump is a white nationalist. But there is nothing that he has said differently from 2015 to 2025. It's just been mainstream corporate media and the voters that like to sane wash the things that he's been saying for the last 10 years unequivocally. I'm telling you, JD Vance makes me sick. He really does. There's just him more so than other people. There's just something because he's just so inauthentic, right? And to me, it's, you have to, regardless if I hate everything that you're saying, if I despise it, if it is so gross, at least you believe your own bullshit. JD Vance doesn't believe in anything. And so here he is again. And this time, this is about questions with regard to 42 million people. That is the story of this week. 42 million people are going to lose their SNAP benefits. 42 million. And when asked about it, of course, JD Vance does what he always does, which is just sidestep and lie and not really offer anything of merit or truth. But, let's take a listen for a moment.
Mr. Vice President, on the issue of the shutdown, there is the concern about 42 million people losing their SNAP benefits.
Of course.
Over this weekend. The administration has moved a lot of money around to pay troops, to pay federal law enforcement, and is telling Congress you can't move money around to pay at least some of those benefits. Why not? And would there be some push perhaps in the next 48 hours to try to do that so Americans don't go hungry?
Well, here's the problem. If you go back to previous government shutdowns, what has happened is that sometimes the president has tried to make the shutdown as painful as possible on the American people. I give the president of the United States great credit and the entire team for trying to make this as painless as possible. The Democrats are acting irresponsibly. He doesn't want the American people to suffer because of it. But look, right now, this government, this administration, we're like guys running around, with a leak in a damn wall, trying to plug it with bubble gum. And we plug one spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble.
I will spare you. He says nothing of note. We're talking about 42 million people not being able to put food on their table in the coming days and weeks ahead. 42 million, 1 in 5 children receive SNAP benefits, 1 in 5. And we're supposed to be this land of abundance, right? You listen to him and you realize exactly what is happening here, which is what we have watched happen in Gaza, for instance, the weaponization of food. That's what they are doing. You see, there are contingency plans that are built into government shutdowns to ensure that people who receive SNAP continue to receive it regardless of if there is a government shutdown or not. There is a contingency plan that is in place, and what this administration did is just delete those particular sections from their website yesterday. You see, because if they allow for people to be fed, then they won't have the same amount of urgency. This is the belief system that they have. But the reality is that they think, because they live inside of their warped Fox News universe, that the American people are blaming the shutdown on Democrats, when in fact, Democrats don't run the government right now. Republicans do. And so a myriad of states are suing the Trump administration for trying to starve 42 million people. And most recently, a hearing happened. Judge, and this is from the New York Times, judge skeptical over Trump administration decision to suspend food stamps. The arguments at times appear to frustrate the judge, who promised to rule soon on a suit filed by roughly 24 states seeking to ensure people don't go hungry as a result of the budgetary dispute. On Thursday, today, the Trump administration staunchly defended its decision to stop paying food stamps during the government shutdown, telling a federal court that it could not tap a tranche of available funds to provide aid to millions of poor Americans in November. The arguments at times appeared to frustrate and confound a federal judge who promised to rule soon on a lawsuit filed by roughly 24 states that seek to ensure people do not go hungry as a result of a budgetary dispute. The legal wrangling concerned the imminent fate of the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, which provides monthly benefits to roughly 42 million people nationally. By November 1st, which is this weekend, the program is set to exhaust its remaining funds, making it the most significant and dire casualty of a government-wide closure that is now stretched into its 5th week. Entering the hearing, top officials in the Trump administration had acknowledged that they had billions of dollars left over across multiple federal accounts, including money in an emergency reserve specifically for SNAP. The amounts appeared to total more than would be needed to cover the full costs of providing food stamps if the shutdown continued through November. But the lawyers for the Justice Department signaled that the administration could not or would not use those funds despite the looming shortfall. In court filings and oral arguments, the Trump administration maintained, or lied, that there were legal obstacles to transferring existing money to SNAP. There are not. Technical hurdles in remitting payments quickly and other budgetary constraints to consider at the Agriculture Department where the funds would originate. Folks, let me just say that the pieces that they deleted from their website yesterday, as if people were not readily going there for information, tell you exactly what you can do in order to ensure that 42 million people don't go hungry. You see, we know that ever so often, particularly when, Republicans are in charge, there is always a government shutdown. And so that is why a contingency plan is in place, to ensure that the people do not have to suffer while, congressmen and women continue to get paid while everyone else is furloughed or going to food banks. And so, folks, the article continues. So throughout the Thursday hearing, Judge Indira Talwani of the U.S. District Court from the District of Massachusetts frequently expressed her skepticism about the administration's claims. At one point, the judge said she saw no reason the government could not tap into its own emergency reserves given the nature and duration of the fiscal crisis. Mind you, just a reminder, folks, this shutdown is only second in length to Donald Trump's first government shutdown in 2018. And this one, by the way, Little Fisher-Price, Speaker of the House, Little Johnson, has said that, maybe we'll open it up in January, or maybe not. At one point, the judge said she saw no reason the government could not tap its own reserves. And she said this: Congress has put money in an emergency fund. It's hard for me to understand how this isn't an emergency when there's no money and a lot of people are needing their SNAP benefits. Judge Tawali later said she believed it was up to the Trump administration to figure out how you're going to stretch that emergency money for now. You know, I often in moments like this go back to, you know, Tupac Shakur, who said, got money for war, but can't feed the poor. And it's not a can't feed the poor, it's a won't or don't want to feed the poor. And I'm telling you, all of this ties into their eugenics, that belief that some people are just, you know, disposable and dispensable, and others not so much. You see, we center poverty around this idea of it being a personal failing or a moral failing of that particular person, rather than, guess what? A systemic failure. We always associate poverty with criminality, right? With people who are lazy, and somehow have decided that we then turn the elite, even that language, puts them above the rest of us as if somehow they are better. No, you're just luckier. Lucky to be born on third base. But I tell you, as people are starting to lift, right, the rose-colored glasses, lift the wool from their eyes, because this situation that we are in requires your attention, is that I want people to understand that you are closer to being unhoused and on SNAP and on a food line than you are to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. And I beg of people to start moving accordingly. So next up, we go to my other least favorite person. My God, if there is somebody that I hate more, it is Little Johnson. Let's take a listen to what he says when asked by Dana Bash why he can't just, you know, provide the basics.
Can I just ask you? Can I just ask you, because you mentioned it, that you all have found ways to pay members of the military, which, you know, people understand, and WIC, which people also understand. But why are you drawing the line now on 40 million Americans who literally will not be able to eat without government assistance? Why not help them in the short term? And
Dan,
why are
I'm
they?
not
Why
drawing
are
the
they?
line. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait. I reject the premise of the question. I'm not drawing the line. The Democrats are drawing the line. If we had a contingency fund that we could use, that would be done. The White House has demonstrated over and over, the executive branch, all the cabinet secretaries are doing everything they can to mitigate and reduce the pain. But that ability is not available for SNAP because the contingency fund had to be prior authorized by Congress.
Well, they say
in
that
the
that's not what the law shows.
No,
And
well,
that,
that's ridiculous.
Certainly the administration has shown that they are very
this has
happy
already
to
been
move money
adjudicated.
around without Congress saying yes.
No, Dennis, they're just simply not true. It's already been adjudicated. When they tried to do that in the first Trump administration, the GAO, for example, determined it was illegal. And the Democrats, when they voted against the clean CR, they voted down that possibility. So it is not legally available to do that. Believe me, the White House has already demonstrated over and over.
Let me tell you something. Believe me, anytime that somebody utters a bunch of bullshit and then at the end, right, of that diatribe says, believe me, you know it's bullshit, okay? Because I don't have to convince you to believe me if I'm actually telling the truth. And we know that this man lies as well as he breathes. And it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me how they keep it up. At one point in time, you know, maybe, I don't know, eons and eons from now, maybe somebody will study their brains to understand, like, what's wrong there? What screw is missing? What gap in empathy don't they have? Like, what synapses are not firing when it comes to seeing people's full humanity and your ability to just readily lie? I continue to say that their policies are sociopathic, and they prove it time and time again. He says, I wish that there was a contingency plan. Literally, there is. Congress created a contingency plan to be able to fund SNAP benefits while there is a government shutdown. So you are just standing there and lying. And again, I expect very little these days, dear friends, from mainstream corporate media, right? Because honestly, Mike Johnson is coming on. Where is your list of facts? Why aren't you throwing things up on the screen that tell you exactly what Congress created a contingency plan for? Why aren't you able to then push back with the section and the part of the law that you were talking about? Why do you allow for these people to just sit there and lie when you know that there are facts that you can provide to the American people that are watching? Make it make sense, because it just surely does not. So moving on from where we are with the possible 42 million people going hungry, on top of which, here's how much Obamacare prices are about to rise across the country. So let's just lay out this perfect storm. Hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off from their jobs, both in the federal government and in the private sector. I talked to you yesterday about Amazon, 14,000, UPS, 48,000, okay? And on, Paramount, 1,000, Microsoft, thousands, right? Target getting ready to do yet another major cut, okay? Now, more and more people are lining up for food banks. Now, those who were initially on SNAP, or now those who are going to need to be on SNAP, are not going to get those benefits. Where do you think that this is all leading? On top of which, why is the government shut down right now? Because Democrats are fighting for healthcare subsidies to be extended so that the costs don't skyrocket across the country. Prices for next year's Obamacare health insurance plan became public this week, with big increases in premiums across the country. We now have data that shows how much more people will pay. Most people who buy their own coverage don't pay full price. It sure as hell feels like full price to me, just saying. Tax credits created by the Affordable Care Act help pay the bills, but the new prices reflect what will happen if extra tax subsidies, first passed in 2021 and extended in 2022, both under Biden, are allowed to expire at the end of the year. Changes in 2026 monthly premiums without extra subsidies. Folks, take a look at this. If your income is $22,000, you're staying steady, plus $66. Doesn't seem like much, but if you're making only $22,000 a year, $66 a month extra starts to add up. At $35,000, you can see the numbers, plus $132 across ages. $65,000 plus $80 if you were 27 years old. If you are 40, plus $196. Folks, if you are 60, which is the time around, you start needing more care, more checkups to make sure that your body is still functioning. Do you see that number? An additional $920 a month? These are monthly premiums. This is not by the year. I say this often on this show. Most Americans cannot afford an emergency bill of $400, and you're talking about $920 extra dollars a month for healthcare if you were 60 and up. If you make $95,000, that number is $714. If you are 60 and up. The magnitude of the change depends on where people live, how old they are, and what they earn. Extending the subsidies would cost the federal government around $23 billion next year and about $350 billion over the next decade, according to estimates from the Congressional Budget Office. Without them, many Americans will face much higher costs before the midterm elections next fall. In some cases, increases of more than $1,000 per month. And I often share this with all of you, so let me share it again. I pay my health insurance out of pocket. My health insurance is $700 a month. I cannot afford for it to go up any more than that. And I've already had a conversation where I'm going to all of my doctor's appointments right now, trying to squeeze them in for the end of the year, because if my health insurance is raised by $100 a month, I'm not going to pay it. I am going to have to go without insurance. And at my age, that's kind of a fucking gamble. But if you don't have the money, what are you supposed to do? This is where you end up using the emergency room, right, as your general practitioner, because you have to wait for things to get so extraordinarily bad. But my God, folks, like, majority of us are not wealthy. That is a significant amount of money to pay. And I can't even wrap my mind around if I am two people who are both paying out of pocket. That is wild. And people in other, right, industrialized, high-income countries do not pay that. Why? Because they have universal health care. Explain to me why these subsidies were only extended 1 year and then the next year. Oh, because Republicans have worked tirelessly to try and overturn Obamacare altogether. Donald Trump had the audacity while sitting on Air Force One to say, oh, Obamacare has never worked. And not one journalist said, you've had 15 years to come up with an alternative, and you haven't. The fact is, again, they don't care. They want people to die. Right? If you create the conditions for desperation, for chaos, then guess what? You get to fill those for-profit prisons and you get to give kickbacks to your donors. You know, the stocks that went through the roof when Donald Trump became president again? For-profit prisons. You think they're just building all of those detention centers for the undocumented? No, they're not. They know that they are creating the conditions for desperation, and they know that eventually people will turn to breaking the law, because what alternatives are they being given? People don't break the law generally for fun, folks. It's because they're locked inside of a system that is working against them, regardless of how hard they work to change their lot in life. And that's where government is supposed to step in. You pay taxes for a reason. And yet we've all been fine with accepting the status quo, accepting the fucking crumbs that they throw out while they're giving billionaires tax cuts. And how are they paying for it? On our backs. They like to create this idea in our minds that, oh, you know what, things are just too expensive. We couldn't possibly. While funding the Pentagon up the fucking ass, while providing a $170 billion budget to ICE. $170 billion is half of what extending the subsidies would cost over 10 years. But you just put that into a private militia? And you want to tell us that there's no money while Donald Trump builds his fucking Maria Antoinette ballroom? $40 billion to Argentina? So don't tell me that you don't have money. Just tell me you don't give a shit, because at least then you're honest. So this funding is at the heart of the congressional fight that has left the government shut down for nearly a month. Democrats have demanded an extension as a condition of their support for government funding bill. Republicans have said they won't consider an extension until the government is reopened. And so here we are. And to put a finer note on this, for the lowest earners, free insurance could go away. For people earning the lowest incomes, the expiration of the subsidies will mean the end of free, generous insurance. Right now, with the extra subsidies, eligible Americans who earn less than $24,000 a year don't have to contribute money that they don't have toward their premiums, though they still face some co-payments and deductibles when they use their insurance. And also what? Jeff Bezos can get another yacht? And they think, for whatever reason, folks, that Democrats are going to be the ones to blame. But as Jessica Tarlov says on Fox, yeah, that's not the case. And I'm just, I get disgusted. And then I have to take a moment. Hold 1 second, because I'm having an issue with my videos. Let's see if we can play this one right now.
Denton put up the Navigator survey, which shows that the American public is blaming the Republicans by 14 points now, and it was just 10 points last week.
Now, Trump may be crazy and he may be a pathological liar, but he's not stupid, and he's not a bad politician. He understands where people are at. I think he is going to catch on, that the American people are not sympathetic to giving tax breaks, massive tax breaks, to billionaires and cutting nutrition programs for kids. All right, somebody else jump in here.
And again, she was talking about Harry Enton, right? Jessica Tarlov said, Harry Enton on CNN put up the numbers. I don't know where Republicans get the idea that, the American people are blaming Democrats, and by them repeating constantly that it's the Democrat shutdown. No, it's the Trump regime shutdown. That's what it is. And that's what it has been, and that's what it will be moving forward. So while Donald Trump plays his tariff game that has raised the price on everything, while Doge, under the guise of Elon Musk, fired hundreds of thousands of workers on top of the private industries that are firing hundreds of thousands of workers, folks, we're looking at potentially by the end of this year, 1 million people having lost their jobs. We haven't seen those numbers since the global health pandemic. And Republicans think that what? Folks are all going to take this in stride? I don't think so. But here's the thing. Earlier this week, Anderson Cooper opened up his show. And I'm only going to play a portion of it, because here's where I come back to. January 6th should have been the beginning of the end of Donald Trump. One, we should have never given him an opportunity to become president in 2016. But because of misogyny and the hate of women in power, they rolled the dice on someone with no experience versus someone with all the experience because, Hillary Clinton didn't like to bake cookies. And so white women hated her. But after January 6th, when Donald Trump told people to go and take their country back, and then they stormed the Capitol, beating police officers, causing massive damage, that should have been the end. After losing the election, he should have been put in handcuffs. We should have done what the Brazilians were able to do with Bolsonaro and hold him accountable and put his ass in jail, because that's what it means to live inside of a republic where no one is above the law. Instead of preserving institutions, you actually do the work to make sure that the people inside of those institutions do their jobs. So Anderson Cooper started out his show with reminding folks about January 6th, the 1,500 terrorists that Donald Trump has pardoned, and where some of those violent people are today. And folks, I just, when good things are said, I will give credit. And for this, I will give him credit.
But I'm honest with two prosecutors who may be paying the price tonight for what they said about a convicted felon who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, namely that he and the people who did it were part of a mob. Taylor Taranto is his name. He was pardoned for that, but convicted this year after he was caught near former President Obama's home in Washington with guns and hundreds of rounds of ammo in his van. He was arrested after making violent threats against the government and several elected officials and found guilty by a judge in connection with all of it. Now, the two prosecutors, meantime, who made that case and secured the conviction, they were suspended today for no reason that we know of, just a day after making factually true statements characterizing the attack on the Capitol, which again, Toronto, seen here, circled, and some 1,500 other people were pardoned for by the president on his first day back in office.
So we're in the Capitol building, legislative building, and he just stormed it. And anyway, they're not.
Slow talker he is, but he said we just stormed it, and he was not alone, obviously. It was recorded on video, an angry mob, thousands of people smashing their way in, many after violently clashing with police, beating some very badly. We all watched it, several of whom later died shortly thereafter, including 2 by suicide. We saw and we heard it all unfold as it happened, a lot of it live, and we're showing it to you right now. Now, here's how those two prosecutors, who were put on leave today, described it in their sentencing memo just yesterday, and I quote, "On January 6, 2021, thousands of people comprising a mob of rioters attacked the U.S. Capitol while a joint session of Congress met to certify the results of the 2020 presidential election. Toronto was accused of participating in the riot in Washington, D.C. by entering the U.S. Capitol building. After the riot, Toronto refused to return to his home in the state of Washington, where he promoted conspiracy theories about the events of January 6, 2021, end quote. So they filed that yesterday to make the case that he deserved a substantial sentence and were suspended today, according to a person familiar with the matter. Now, that memo, by the way, was missing from the court docket this afternoon and has since been refiled by other prosecutors minus any description of January 6. And though the Justice Department is not saying this is why they were put on leave, the administration has already fired dozens of career prosecutors who handled January 6 cases and pardoned or commuted, obviously, the sentences of everyone connected with the attack.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon. So this is a big one.
Well, he's been calling them hostages, of course, long before that and rewriting the history of that day for about as long. But if, in fact, it turns out that describing the crowd that stormed the Capitol as a mob was, in fact, what got these prosecutors suspended, it's hard not to conclude they were disciplined for speaking accurately. Unless you think that what you see is not a mob and what you're hearing is not what people in mobs say.
So they are literally firing people for writing the truth. Two prosecutors put on leave for describing January 6th accurately as a riot, as a mob. Donald Trump calls them hostages, and now he is rewriting history and firing those that continue to tell the truth, as if we all don't have accounts and records of that day. It's wild. And so I bring you to this because, I show you the bad, but it is also important to provide you with some good things that are happening. And there is a new organization that has launched. And I want you to take a listen because Nicole Wallace on MSNBC tells us about it.
As Donald Trump continues with his sweeping obsession of retaliation and retribution and mounting daily threats against anyone who dares to dissent, anyone who dared to try to hold him accountable, Americans have made it clear that they will not accept doing nothing about it. Millions of Americans turned out in a massive and peaceful way this month in thousands of cities and small towns for one of the largest single-day protests ever in American history. But there's still that feeling. I'm sure all of you ask it and talk about it in your daily lives. I hear it every day. What else can we do about it to defy what we're seeing, to defy what feels wrong, and defy the lawlessness of what we see playing out? Starting today, there's an answer. There's a new way to find some of those answers. And this is brand new, an exclusive announcement right here about the launch of an effort called Defiance.org. It is a coalition of national security veterans, whistleblowers, and pro-democracy leaders providing monthly updates and simplified direction on how you might choose to push back peacefully, lawfully, and defiantly against presidential abuses of power. Already, the first wave of former government officials have signed onto their new Declaration of Defiance, a nationwide mutual aid pact to defend any group targeted by Donald Trump's retribution. Joining us now to talk about it, the head of one of the organizations partnering to launch Defiance.org, the CEO of Represent Us, Maria McFarland Sanchez Moreno, and the group's co-founder, Miles Taylor, is still here with us. So why did you do this?
Look, after, as you know, Nicole, I got attacked by the president in April. I had a lot of wonderful people coming out of the woodwork to say, how can we help you? And I'm lucky. My family got taken care of. We've got the best legal team in America. We've got great supporters. But my concern was there was not the infrastructure to go protect other people and organizations as the Trump revenge campaign ramped up. And there's a lot of good ways to get involved. The protests, other nonprofit groups, but people feel adrift because this administration is flooding the zone with actions. And there is no one organization that can fix it. And so I keep getting asked, what can I do? And I got frustrated that there wasn't just one place people could go that's constantly giving new recommendations. And so we launched Defiance.org. And that word means a lot to me because literally that word really turned things in my and my wife's head when we were thinking about fighting back. A lot of people told us to lay low. Lawyers, friends, family said, do not punch back because the risks of retaliation will go up. But if we don't fight back, the risks of retaliation against other people are much higher. So we've launched Defiance to be that place. We call it a club for courageous Americans, and we use it to highlight the great groups out there people can get involved in and specific actions they can take to push back against the president's unprecedented revenge campaign in this country.
Absolutely brilliant. These are the types of steps that need to be taken, organizations that need to be formed in order to help Americans fight back. Because what is evident is that the politicians who we elected to help us are not going to do that. Corporations are surely not going to do that. The media itself is not going to provide you with the information that you need on a regular basis that you need it. They do it when it is, worth it to them or when they're called out about it. But Defiance.org, I encourage everyone to go and take a look at to see what can be done because I'm asked all the time, what can I do? What can I do? I said that October 18th, the No Kings rally was an important day. It is an important visual, right? To show the impact, to show the numbers. But what you do on the 19th and the days and the weeks and the months and the years after that are even more important. And so here is an opportunity to figure out where you can fit in, where you can begin to push back and defy this lawless administration. Folks, that is it for me today on the Danielle Moodie Show. As you know, I will be back on Friday, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern for Democracy-ish with my fantastic co-host Wajahat Ali. And if you are on Substack, do go over and check out my latest Fire Pit chats, conversations that I had today. I couldn't even think of the word. Conversations that I had today, which are up right now. And folks, just as always, I want to shout out the super stickers and the super thanks. And those folks, memberships have launched. I have launched memberships on this channel. There are 2 tiers currently that you can join. And again, I've launched it as a way to give those that have wanted to support my work on a monthly basis the ability to do so. But your super stickers and your super thanks go so far, right? Every dollar, every cent goes so far. And I know that many people are not able to support on a monthly basis, but when they have a few bucks, they throw it my way. So I want to shout out Vibin, thank you so much. Ernst, who just became a YouTube member and is always a great supporter. Daisy, who just became a YouTube member. Antifa's daughter, thank you so much for the $5. Ernst, thank you so much for the $10. Susan just gifted a Danielle Moodie membership. Thank you so much, Susan, for that and for your constant support and moderation. Paul, for your $10. Navy, for your $1.99. Melissa, for your $5. Thank you so much. And Giant Paper Panda, $5. Conway, appreciate you for 20. E. Schwartz, as always, Navy, and Real Talk. Thank you guys so very much. Like I say, each and every single dollar goes to allowing me to create the content that you all deserve. I will be back tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern for Democracy-ish Live. As always, dear friends, power to the people and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane. And in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you back here tomorrow. Be well.